I stood paralyzed under the pulsing neon lights, watching the man who had promised me forever slide his hands under another man's shirt, destroying my entire world with a single kiss. If you love emotional, dramatic boy love stories full of betrayal, arranged marriages, and finding true love, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below to let us know what you think of the story so far. Your support helps us create more thrilling stories. Now let's dive into the drama. Part 1. The Shattered Promise. The bass of the music vibrated through the floorboards of the crowded off-campus house, but the only sound echoing in my ears was the shattering of my own heart. I stood paralyzed under the pulsing neon lights, watching the man who had promised me forever slide his hands under another man's shirt, destroying my entire world with a single kiss. My boyfriend of 3 years, Noah. The captain of the university swimming team, the golden boy with the devastating smile, and the man I thought I was going to marry. We had built a life together, or at least, I thought we had. I had spent the last 3 weeks meticulously planning our anniversary surprise, saving up from my part-time job at the campus art studio to buy him the vintage silver watch he had been eyeing for months. The small velvet box felt like a lead weight in my pocket right now. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room suddenly felt thick, choking me as I watched them. The stranger had his arms wrapped tightly around Noah's neck, and Noah, my Noah, was leaning into the kiss with a fiery passion I hadn't felt from him in months. They weren't hiding. They were in the middle of the living room, surrounded by our mutual friends, laughing and cheering as if this was entirely normal, as if I didn't exist. My chest caved in, a literal, physical pain radiating from my ribs. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, it was the sheer humiliation. A few people noticed me standing in the doorway. The cheers died down into awkward, pitying whispers. "Oh my God, Julian is here," someone muttered. The shift in the room's energy made Noah pull away from the stranger. He turned his head, his messy blonde hair falling over his forehead, and his blue eyes locked onto mine. I braced myself for the panic. I waited for the guilt to wash over his face, for him to push the guy away and run to me with apologies tumbling from his lips. But it never happened. Noah's expression didn't falter. There wasn't an ounce of remorse in his eyes. Instead, he let out a heavy, annoyed sigh, as if my presence was nothing more than an inconvenient interruption to his Friday night. He whispered something to the stranger, gave the guy's waist a final squeeze, and sauntered over to me with that same infuriatingly confident smirk he used when he won a race. "Julian," he said, his voice casual, lacking any tremor of guilt. "What are you doing here? I thought you were studying for your finals." "What am I doing here?" My voice came out as a fragile, broken whisper. I hated myself for the tears that were already pooling in my eyes. I hated that I was giving him the satisfaction of seeing my pain. "It's our anniversary, Noah. We had dinner reservations. I've been calling you for 3 hours. Noah rolled his eyes, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Right. The anniversary. Look, Julian, I didn't want to do this here, but you're kind of forcing my hand. We're 22. We're in our prime. You've been acting like we're a retired married couple for the last year. I need space to breathe. I need to explore." Explore. The word hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. We've been together for 3 years. I gave you everything. My first kiss, my first time, my entire heart. And you want to explore. "Don't be so dramatic," Noah groaned, running a hand through his hair. His tone shifted from casual to patronizing, an artificial sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I still care about you, Jules. But love doesn't mean I'm chained to you. We never signed a contract. I'm just having fun. If you weren't so uptight, maybe we could have an open arrangement." The audacity of his words completely stripped away my sorrow, replacing it with a sudden, blinding rage. He was rewriting our entire history. He was the one who had begged me to move in with him. He was the one who had brought up a future together, building a fantasy that he was now discarding like trash. He reached out, his fingers brushing my shoulder in a fake gesture of comfort. I violently jerked away from his touch. "Don't ever put your hands on me again," I spat, my voice finally finding its strength. It rang clear and sharp over the lowered volume of the party music. "We are done, Noah. Have fun exploring, because you are never coming back to me." For a fraction of a second, genuine surprise flickered across Noah's face. He was used to me forgiving him. He was used to me bending backward to accommodate his moods and his demands. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to spin another manipulative web, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned on my heel and pushed my way out of the suffocating heat of the house, ignoring the stares and whispers of the people I once called friends. The cold autumn night air hit me like a bucket of ice water as I practically sprinted to my car. I didn't let the tears fall until the car doors were locked. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, letting out a sob that tore from the very bottom of my soul. I cried for the 3 years I had wasted. I cried for the future I had imagined, and for the trust that had been so brutally, casually destroyed. I sat in the dark parking lot for what felt like hours, numb and hollowed out. I had nothing left. I had pushed my own family away because they hadn't approved of Noah. My parents were wealthy, traditional, and terrifyingly strict. They had always warned me that Noah was a selfish opportunist, and I had foolishly defended him at the cost of my relationship with them. Suddenly, my phone buzzed against the center console. The bright screen illuminated the dark cabin. It was a text message from my mother. The timing was so eerie it felt like divine intervention. Julian, your father and I have finalized the negotiations with the Sterling family. Liam Sterling is ready to proceed with the arranged marriage proposal. He is expecting to meet you for lunch tomorrow to discuss the terms. We expect you to be there. Do not embarrass us. An arranged marriage. 6 months ago, when they first brought it up, I had laughed in their faces. I had proudly declared that I was deeply in love and would marry for passion, not for a corporate merger. But sitting here, completely shattered by the passion I had fought so hard for, the idea didn't seem so ridiculous anymore. Passion had brought me nothing but anxiety, betrayal, and a broken heart. Passion was a liar. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe a cold, calculated arrangement based on mutual benefit and respect was safer than risking my soul on a gamble called love. Liam Sterling. I knew the name. He was the 26-year-old CEO of Sterling Architecture, a man known in the business world as a ruthless, untouchable iceberg. I looked back at the frat house, where Noah was probably already back in the arms of that stranger, not giving me a second thought. My tears dried up, replaced by a cold, sharp seed of defiance. Noah thought I was nothing without him. He thought I would be sitting at home, waiting for him to finish his exploring. I picked up my phone. My fingers were trembling, but my resolve was absolute. I typed out a reply to my mother. I will be there. Send me the address. The next day, the atmosphere at Laura, the city's most exclusive, ridiculously expensive restaurant, was suffocatingly quiet. I sat at a secluded corner table, obsessively smoothing the wrinkles on my dark navy blazer. I hadn't slept a wink. My eyes were slightly red, but I had masked the exhaustion with sheer nervous adrenaline. Exactly at noon, the heavy oak doors of the restaurant opened, and the air in the room seemed to shift. Liam Sterling walked in. I had seen pictures of him in business magazines, but nothing prepared me for the overwhelming, commanding presence of the man in real life. He was tall, imposingly tall, dressed in an immaculate, charcoal gray bespoke suit that hugged his broad shoulders perfectly. His dark hair was styled with effortless precision, but it was his eyes that caught me off guard. They were a piercing, stormy gray, sharp enough to cut glass, yet strangely calm. He moved with a predatory grace, his footsteps silent on the carpet as he approached my table. I stood up immediately, feeling suddenly very small. "Mr. Sterling," I managed to say, hoping my voice didn't betray my absolute terror. "Julian," his voice was deep, a rich baritone that sent a sudden, unexpected shiver down my spine. He didn't offer his hand. Instead, he simply gestured for me to sit down as he took the seat opposite me. He didn't bother looking at the menu. His intense gray eyes locked onto mine, studying me with the clinical precision of an architect inspecting a foundation. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Liam said smoothly, folding his large hands on the table. "I am a very busy man, and I appreciate efficiency. I know why you suddenly agreed to this meeting." I blinked, taken aback by his bluntness. "Excuse me. Your boyfriend Noah," Liam stated calmly, as if discussing the weather. "He cheated on you last night at a campus party. You broke up with him, and 20 minutes later, your mother received your text confirming this meeting." My face flushed a deep, burning crimson. I felt completely exposed, stripped bare before this terrifying stranger. You had me investigated? I don't enter into million-dollar partnerships blindly, Julian, and I certainly don't enter into a marriage blindly." Liam's expression remained completely unreadable, a flawless mask of composure. "I know everything about you. I know you're an art major. I know you prefer Earl Grey tea over coffee. And I know your heart was broken less than 24 hours ago. I wanted to run. I wanted to stand up and walk out of the restaurant, escaping this intense scrutiny. But I forced myself to hold his gaze. If you know I'm heartbroken, why are you still here? Don't you want a husband who actually loves you? For the first time, a microscopic, almost invisible smirk touched the corner of Liam's lips. It was dangerously attractive. I don't need your heart right now, Julian, Liam said, leaning slightly closer. The faint, intoxicating scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne drifted across the table. Love is messy, unpredictable, and usually disappointing. I am looking for a partner. Someone loyal, someone stable, someone who will stand by my side and build a life with me. I offer protection, limitless resources, and absolute fidelity. In return, I expect your complete loyalty. The word hung in the air. Fidelity. After months of begging Noah for basic decency, this powerful, intimidating man was offering it as a baseline guarantee. It was terrifying, yet incredibly intoxicating. What if I can't give you what you want? I whispered, my defenses crumbling under his intense stare. Liam's eyes softened, just a fraction, revealing a brief glimpse of warmth beneath the ice. I don't make investments that fail, Julian. We will make this work. Before I could respond, a sudden, loud commotion erupted at the entrance of the restaurant. The maitre d' was trying to block someone from entering, but the person shoved past him, storming into the elegant dining room. My blood ran cold. It was Noah. He looked disheveled, frantic, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto me. Julian, Noah shouted, marching toward our table, completely ignoring the shocked gasps of the wealthy patrons. What the hell is this? Your roommate said you were on a date. With him. Noah glared at Liam with absolute venom. You think you can just dump me and immediately run to some rich suit? Noah reached out, aggressively grabbing my wrist to pull me out of my chair. But before Noah's fingers could even tighten around my skin, a large, firm hand clamped down onto Noah's wrist like an iron vice. Liam had stood up so fast I barely registered the movement. He towered over Noah, his gray eyes flashing with a terrifying, dark dominance that sucked the air out of the room. Liam gripped Noah's wrist, effortlessly twisting it just enough to make Noah wince and let go of me. Do not touch my fiancé. Liam's voice dropped an octave, resonating with a quiet, lethal warning. He is with me now, and if you ever come near him again, I will personally destroy your entire future. End of Part 1. Part 2, the contract and the choice. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its collective breath. The clinking of fine silverware against porcelain had completely ceased, and the soft jazz music playing from the hidden speakers felt abruptly loud in the heavy, suffocating silence. Noah's face drained of all color, his arrogant bravado instantly evaporating under the crushing weight of Liam Sterling's lethal glare. The iron grip Liam had on Noah's wrist wasn't just a physical restraint, it was an absolute display of dominance. Noah, who always prided himself on being the strongest, fastest guy in the room, suddenly looked like a frightened child standing before a tempest. Fiancé. Noah stammered, his voice cracking horribly. The words seemed to choke him. He looked wildly from Liam's terrifying, sculpted face to me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Julian, what the hell is he talking about? Tell this psycho to let me go. Do not raise your voice at him, Liam commanded, his tone barely above a whisper, yet it echoed with the force of a thunderclap. With a smooth, calculated motion, Liam shoved Noah backward. The movement was effortless, but it sent Noah stumbling back several feet until he crashed embarrassingly into a dessert cart. Julian and I are getting married, Liam continued, taking a slow, predatory step toward Noah, completely ignoring the scattered macarons and shattered glass around Noah's feet. You had 3 years to treat him with the respect he deserves, and you squandered it. Now you are going to walk out of these doors, and you are going to forget Julian's name, his phone number, and his existence. If I hear that you have so much as breathed in his direction again, I will make sure you are expelled from the university by tomorrow morning, and your precious swimming career will be permanently dismantled. Do I make myself perfectly clear? Noah scrambled to his feet, his chest heaving with panicked breaths. He looked at me, a pathetic mixture of rage and desperation in his eyes, silently begging me to intervene, to save him the way I always did. But I just stood there, my hands trembling slightly, but my chin held high. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Noah swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. Without another word, he turned and practically ran out of the restaurant, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind him. As soon as Noah was out of sight, the terrifying, dark storm in Liam's eyes vanished, replaced instantly by the calm, impenetrable gray I had seen when he first walked in. He turned back to me, and the sudden gentleness in his demeanor gave me emotional whiplash. "Are you hurt?" Liam asked, his voice returning to its smooth, rich baritone. Before I could answer, Liam reached out and gently took my hand. His fingers, which had just gripped Noah like a vice, traced the faint red mark forming on my wrist with astonishing tenderness. The contrast was dizzying. His touch was warm, and a strange, comforting electric current seemed to travel up my arm. "I'm fine," I whispered, staring down at our joined hands. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Liam replied simply, releasing my hand slowly, almost reluctantly. He gestured back to our table. "Please sit. I believe we have an arrangement to discuss, and your tea is getting cold." I sank back into my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline was slowly fading, leaving behind a profound sense of awe. No one had ever protected me like that. Noah had always expected me to be his cheerleader, his support system, fighting his battles while he soaked up the glory. To have a man like Liam Sterling step in front of me, an immovable shield against my pain, was a completely foreign concept. It was intoxicating. Liam took his seat across from me and reached into the inside pocket of his immaculate suit jacket. He pulled out a thick, high-quality envelope and placed it on the table between us. "This is the draft of our marriage contract," Liam said, his tone shifting effortlessly into a professional, measured cadence. "Your parents' lawyers have already reviewed it, but I want you to read it yourself. I do not care what your parents want. I only care about what you agree to." I stared at the thick envelope as if it were a ticking bomb. "A contract. Like a business merger." "Precisely," Liam nodded, leaning back slightly. "But this is not a one-sided acquisition, Julian. I am very aware of the sacrifices you are making by entering into this arrangement. You are giving up your freedom to find conventional romance. Therefore, I have made sure you are heavily compensated." I frowned, a spark of indignation flaring in my chest. "I don't care about your money, Mr. Sterling. My parents have enough money to last 10 lifetimes. That's not why I agreed to meet you." "Liam. Call me Liam," he corrected softly. "And I know you don't care about the money. That is precisely why you are the only candidate I considered for this marriage. But I urge you to look at the terms." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and slid the heavy parchment papers out. I skimmed past the complicated legal jargon, my eyes scanning the heavily bolded sections. My breath hitched as I read the clauses. Clause 4. The Sterling estate will establish a private, fully funded art gallery in the downtown arts district, placed entirely under the ownership and creative direction of Julian. Clause 5. The Sterling estate guarantees full tuition payment and postgraduate funding for Julian's studies, regardless of the marital status's future. Clause 7. Complete financial independence, with a personal monthly stipend that does not require oversight from the Sterling estate or Julian's parents. I looked up, completely stunned. You're buying me an art gallery?" "I investigated your portfolio," Liam said, taking a slow sip of his water. "Your contemporary portraiture is extraordinary, Julian. You have a rare talent. It would be a tragedy to let it go to waste just because your parents think art is a frivolous hobby. In my world, we nurture valuable assets. I want you to paint." Tears stung the back of my eyes, thick and fast. For 3 years, Noah had complained about the smell of my paints. He had constantly belittled my major, calling it an easy degree compared to his grueling athletic schedule. He had never once come to my student exhibitions. And yet this man, this stranger who was supposed to be a cold, calculating CEO, had not only looked at my art, but had built an entire future around it. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking under the emotional weight of the moment. "You could have anyone. You could have a supermodel, an heir to a fortune. Why go through all this trouble for me?" Liam was quiet for a long moment. The restaurant around us had returned to its low hum of conversation, but my entire universe was narrowed down to the striking man sitting across from me. "I live in a world surrounded by people who constantly wear masks," Liam finally said, his voice dropping to an incredibly intimate register. "People who smile to my face and scheme behind my back. When I saw you at the gallery opening 3 months ago, my eyes widened. You were at the university gallery opening?" Liam nodded slowly. "I was a silent sponsor for the event. I saw you standing in the corner, looking utterly miserable while your boyfriend flirted with the waitstaff. You didn't cause a scene. You maintained your dignity, but your eyes carried a profound, quiet loyalty that he was completely blind to. I recognized it immediately. I knew then that if I could redirect that loyalty toward myself, I would never have to question the person standing beside me. He leaned forward, placing his large hands flat on the table. I don't want a trophy, Julian. I want a partner. I need someone I can trust implicitly when the doors are closed. I offer you absolute security, the freedom to pursue your passions, and a home where you will never have to beg for basic respect. All I ask in return is that you stand by my side, and you wear my ring. He reached into his pocket again and placed a small, matte black velvet box on the contract. He didn't open it. He simply left it there, a silent, heavy question resting between us. You don't have to answer right now, Liam said softly, standing up from the table and buttoning his jacket. I know this is overwhelming. Go home. Pack your things. If you decide to sign, my driver will be waiting outside your apartment complex at 6 o'clock tonight to bring you to my penthouse. If you don't, he paused, his jaw tightening slightly. If you don't, the car will leave, and I will inform our parents that the deal fell through. The choice is entirely yours. Without another word, Liam Sterling turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving me completely alone with a contract that promised me the world and a velvet box that held my fate. The walk back to the off-campus apartment I shared with 2 other art students felt like a blur. My mind was racing, a chaotic whirlwind of fear, excitement, and a strange, bubbling hope. I had a choice. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't just reacting to Noah's demands or my parents' expectations. Liam had given me the power to choose. I pushed the door to my apartment open, immediately heading for my bedroom to start packing. But the moment I stepped into the cramped hallway, I froze. Noah was sitting on my battered living room couch, his head in his hands. How did you get in here? I demanded, the familiar spike of anxiety hitting my chest before I forcefully pushed it down. I wasn't the same person I was yesterday. Noah's head snapped up. His eyes were red, and he looked genuinely miserable. He stood up and rushed toward me, stopping just a few feet away, perhaps remembering Liam's threat. Jules, baby, please, Noah begged, his voice trembling. I had to see you. You have to listen to me. I was drunk last night. The pressure of the swim trials, the stress. I lost my mind for a second. It meant nothing. The guy meant nothing. That's exactly the problem, Noah, I said coldly, walking past him into my bedroom and pulling my duffel bag from the closet. He meant nothing, and you still threw away 3 years for him. You threw me away for nothing. I made a mistake. Noah followed me to the doorway, watching in panic as I started throwing my clothes into the bag. But you can't be serious about this. This Sterling guy. He's a monster, Julian. Everyone knows he's a ruthless shark. He doesn't love you. He's just buying you because you're pretty and your parents have connections. And what were you doing? I snapped, turning to face him, my hands shaking with anger. You used me. You used me for rent money. You used me to do your laundry. You used me for emotional support while you gave your body and your charm to anyone who looked at you twice. Liam might be buying my time, but at least he's honest about the transaction. At least he values what he's getting. Julian, please. Noah dropped to his knees, genuine tears spilling down his cheeks. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. The golden boy shattered. I love you. I swear to God I love you. Give me one more chance. Cancel this ridiculous arrangement. I'll drop off the swim team. I'll do whatever you want. I stood over him, looking down at the man who had been the center of my universe for so long. Yesterday, this sight would have broken me. I would have dropped my bags, fallen to my knees with him, and forgiven everything. But as I looked at Noah, all I could hear was Liam's deep, steady voice. In my world, we nurture valuable assets. I offer you absolute security. I zipped my duffel bag closed and slung it over my shoulder. I walked to my desk, picked up the thick manila envelope containing the signed contract, and carefully placed the matte black velvet box in my pocket. It's too late, Noah, I said quietly, stepping around him. My ride is here. I walked out of the apartment, ignoring his sobbing pleas echoing in the hallway. I pushed open the front doors of the building and stepped out into the cool evening air. Parked at the curb was a sleek black Rolls-Royce. Standing beside the open rear passenger door was not just a driver, but Liam Sterling himself. He had changed out of his suit jacket, wearing a fitted black turtleneck that made him look even more imposing and impossibly handsome. When Liam saw me carrying my bag, a profound, undeniable tension seemed to leave his broad shoulders. The iceberg melted, just for a second, and he offered me a small, breathtaking smile. I walked toward the car, leaving my old life in the dust, and stepped into the terrifying, thrilling unknown of my new one. End of Part 2. Part 3. The Gilded Sanctuary. The ride to the Sterling Tower was wrapped in a thick, velvety silence that felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. The interior of the Rolls-Royce smelled of expensive leather and the faint, intoxicating cedarwood of Liam's cologne. Outside the tinted windows, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and crimson, a fast-moving river of a world I was leaving behind. I sat rigidly against the door, my duffel bag resting near my feet. Every time the car turned a corner, my shoulder brushed against Liam's arm, sending a jolt of electricity straight down my spine. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw locked in a sharp, concentrated line, radiating an aura of absolute control. I was terrified, thrilled, and completely exhausted all at once. "You're shaking." Liam's deep voice suddenly cut through the quiet hum of the engine. He didn't turn his head, but his peripheral vision missed nothing. "I'm fine," I lied, wrapping my arms around my chest. "Just adrenaline, I think. The last 48 hours have been a lot." Liam finally turned to look at me. In the dim light of the back seat, his gray eyes were dark and unreadable, yet profoundly grounding. He reached across the center console and gently placed his large, warm hand over my tightly clasped fingers. The shaking stopped almost instantly. "The chaos is over, Julian," he said softly, his thumb lightly brushing across my knuckles. "You are safe now. I handle the noise from here on out." I swallowed the lump in my throat and simply nodded, not trusting my voice. Noah had always been the source of my chaos. He thrived on drama, constantly keeping me off balance to ensure I was always chasing him. Liam, on the other hand, felt like a massive, immovable anchor in the middle of a storm. The car glided into a private, underground parking garage beneath a towering glass skyscraper. A private elevator, requiring Liam's biometric fingerprint scan, shot us upward until my ears popped. When the polished steel doors finally slid open, I stepped out and the breath was instantly knocked from my lungs. The penthouse was less of an apartment and more of a modern palace suspended in the clouds. The walls facing the city were entirely made of glass, offering a breathtaking, unobstructed view of the glittering skyline. The floors were dark, polished hardwood, covered in plush artisan rugs. Minimalist, high-end furniture was arranged with geometric precision, accented by striking pieces of modern sculpture. It was beautiful, but it was undeniably cold. It looked like a museum where no one was allowed to touch the exhibits. "Welcome to your new home," Liam said, stepping out behind me and effortlessly picking up my duffel bag as if it weighed nothing. I stood paralyzed in the massive foyer, suddenly feeling incredibly small and entirely out of place in my worn-out sneakers and oversized sweater. It's massive. Liam, I don't even know where to stand without feeling like I'm going to break something." A low, genuine chuckle rumbled in Liam's chest, the sound bouncing off the high ceilings. "You can break whatever you want, Julian. It's just furniture. None of it matters." He walked over to a sleek marble console table and set my bag down. Then, he turned to face me, the playful glimmer in his eyes vanishing, replaced by a solemn intensity. "Before I show you to your quarters, there is one piece of business we need to conclude," Liam said, extending his hand palm up. "The box." My heart did a nervous flip in my chest. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the matte black velvet box he had left on the restaurant table. My fingers brushed his as I handed it over, the contact searing against my cool skin. Liam opened the box. Resting inside on the dark cushion was a band of heavy, brushed platinum, inlaid with a subtle, continuous line of crushed black diamonds. It wasn't flashy or gaudy. It was dark, elegant, and dangerously expensive. "I don't expect you to love me tonight, Julian," Liam said, his voice dropping into a register that felt incredibly intimate. He reached out, gently taking my left hand in his. "I don't expect you to share my bed until you are absolutely ready, even if that takes years. But this ring represents my vow of protection and your vow of loyalty. Once I put this on you, the rest of the world ceases to have any claim over you. You are a sterling." He looked up from our hands, his stormy eyes locking onto mine, waiting for permission. The respect he was showing me, the agency he was giving me, was overwhelming. "Put it on," I whispered, my voice trembling but my gaze steady. Liam slid the cold platinum band onto my ring finger. It fit perfectly, a heavy, permanent weight that grounded me to the floor. The moment the metal settled against my skin, an involuntary shudder racked my body. It was done. The contract was sealed. I was engaged to a man I barely knew, yet I felt safer than I had in years. Without a word, Liam lifted my hand and pressed a soft, lingering kiss against the cold metal of the ring. The touch of his lips sent a rush of heat straight to my cheeks. "Come," he said, clearing his throat slightly and stepping back. "Let me show you your sanctuary." He led me down a wide, warmly lit hallway. We passed a massive kitchen that looked like it belonged on a cooking show, a private gym, and an office with towering mahogany bookshelves. At the end of the hall, he stopped in front of a set of heavy oak double doors. He pushed them open, and I audibly gasped. It was a master suite, easily 3 times the size of my entire old apartment. A massive king-sized bed with plush, charcoal gray linens sat in the center. But that wasn't what caught my attention. To the right, a glass partition opened into a massive solarium. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the city lights, and inside, waiting for me, were 3 heavy-duty easels, stacks of premium blank canvases, and a massive wooden cart loaded with every type of oil paint, brush, and solvent I could ever dream of. I had my assistant contact your professors to find out exactly what brand of supplies you prefer, Liam said casually, leaning against the doorframe, watching my reaction. The lighting in the solarium can be adjusted to mimic natural daylight. I thought you might want to start painting again. Tears, hot and fast, suddenly pricked my eyes. Noah used to complain that my art supplies took up too much space on our shared desk. He had once accidentally thrown away my favorite set of brushes because they were cluttering his side of the room. I turned around to face Liam, unable to stop the tears from spilling over my lashes. "You did all this, today? After I agreed to meet you?" Liam's expression softened, the cold CO mask completely melting away. He pushed off the doorframe and closed the distance between us, pulling a crisp, white linen handkerchief from his pocket. He didn't say a word as he gently wiped the tears from my cheeks, his touch feather-light. "I told you, Julian. We nurture valuable assets," he murmured, his thumb brushing away a stray tear that escaped his handkerchief. "You are going to create beautiful things in this room, and I am going to make sure no one ever interrupts you." "Thank you," I choked out, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his care. "Get some sleep," Liam instructed gently, stepping back to give me space. "My suite is on the other side of the penthouse. If you need anything, my door is always unlocked. I will see you in the morning." He pulled the double doors shut behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone in the most luxurious room I had ever seen. But sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford that night. Hours later, the digital clock on the bedside table read 3:14 a.m. I was wrapped in the impossibly soft sheets, staring at the ceiling, my mind violently oscillating between the events of the day. Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't see Liam or the beautiful ring on my finger. I saw Noah. I saw his hands on another man. I heard his cruel laughter. The trauma of the betrayal was a ghost that refused to be evicted from my mind. The silence of the massive penthouse became suffocating. I couldn't breathe. The familiar, crushing weight of a panic attack began to press down on my chest. I threw off the covers, gasping for air, and stumbled out of the bed. I needed water. I needed a distraction. I slipped out of my suite, padding barefoot down the long, dark hallway. The penthouse was mostly swallowed in shadows, but a warm strip of amber light bled out from beneath the door of Liam's study. I hesitated, not wanting to disturb him, but my chest felt tighter with every passing second. Pushing the door open a crack, I peeked inside. Liam was sitting behind a massive oak desk, surrounded by stacks of architectural blueprints. He was wearing a pair of wire-rimmed reading glasses that made him look devastatingly intellectual. The sleeves of his black turtleneck pushed up to reveal strong, vascular forearms. The only light in the room came from the brass lamp on his desk, casting long, dramatic shadows across his sharp jawline. He didn't look up, but his deep voice instantly commanded the room. "You're supposed to be asleep." I froze, caught in the doorway. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I couldn't breathe in there." Liam immediately dropped his pen. He took off his glasses, his gray eyes sweeping over my trembling frame, instantly assessing the situation. He stood up, abandoning his millions of dollars in contracts without a second thought, and walked quickly around the desk. "Come here," he commanded softly. He led me to a dark leather Chesterfield sofa in the corner of the study, and gently pushed me down onto the cushions. Put your head between your knees. Breathe on my count. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. I followed his instructions blindly, clutching the fabric of my pajama pants as I gasped for air. Liam knelt on the floor in front of me, an incredibly powerful man reducing his towering height to be at my eye level. He placed his large, warm hands firmly on my knees, grounding me to the earth. "I've got you," Liam murmured, his voice a steady, rhythmic hum that cut through the panic screaming in my head. "You are here. You are safe. He cannot touch you anymore." It took 10 minutes for my heart rate to finally slow down. When I slowly lifted my head, my face flushed with embarrassment, Liam was still kneeling there, watching me with absolute patience. "I'm sorry," I whispered, scrubbing my hands over my tired face. "You bought a broken husband, Liam. I'm a mess. I shouldn't be unloading this on you on our first night." "Julian, look at me," Liam said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I forced my eyes to meet his. "I am an architect. I build skyscrapers that withstand earthquakes and hurricanes. I know how to handle fractured foundations. You are not broken. You are merely restructuring. And I have nothing but time to help you rebuild." He reached up, brushing my messy hair away from my forehead. The touch was so tender it made my breath hitch all over again. "You don't have to be perfect for me," Liam whispered, his gray eyes burning into mine. "You just have to be mine." End of Part 3. Part 4. The Gilded Cage opens. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my suite, casting long, geometric shadows across the plush carpet. I woke up with a gasp, my hands instinctively gripping the heavy silk sheets. For a terrifying, disorienting second, I expected to smell the stale beer and cheap laundry detergent of the apartment I used to share with Noah. Instead, my senses were met with the crisp, clean scent of fresh linens and a faint trace of cedarwood. I sat up, pushing the sleep from my eyes. The events of the previous night, the restaurant, the contract, the ring, the panic attack in Liam's study, crashed into my waking mind like a tidal wave. I looked down at my left hand. The heavy platinum band with its crushed black diamonds caught the morning light, sparkling with a dark, undeniable permanence. It hadn't been a dream. On the bedside table, resting perfectly in the center of a silver tray, holding a steaming pot of Earl Grey tea, was a thick, cream-colored piece of stationery. I picked it up. The handwriting was sharp, elegant, and aggressively precise, exactly like the man who wrote it. "Julian, I had an early board meeting and did not want to disturb you. My staff has been instructed to give you absolute privacy today. The solarium is yours. Paint. Bleed it onto the canvas. I will return at 5 o'clock this evening to prepare for the Sterling Foundation Gala. We will make our first public appearance tonight. Breathe. L." The single command at the end of the note made my chest tighten with an unexpected warmth. Breathe. He had remembered our late-night crisis. He had remembered exactly what I needed. I threw off the covers and walked straight to the glass-walled solarium. The smell of raw canvas, linseed oil, and expensive pigments hit me like a physical embrace. It was the smell of home. The real home I had neglected for 3 years while I tried to fit into the tiny, suffocating box Noah had built for me. Without thinking, without planning, I grabbed a palette knife and the darkest shade of indigo I could find. I didn't bother changing out of my pajamas. For the next 6 hours, I lost myself completely. I painted the chaos. I painted the crushing, suffocating feeling of the frat house party. I slashed streaks of violent crimson and bruised purple across the canvas. And then slowly, deliberately, I brought in the gray. A stormy, immovable, powerful gray that anchored the chaotic colors, swallowing the noise and replacing it with structure. By the time the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 4 times, I was covered in paint, my hands stained with indigo and gray, but for the first time in months, my lungs felt completely clear. Extraordinary. I jumped, dropping my brush. Liam was standing in the doorway of the suite, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed over his broad chest. He had discarded his suit jacket and tie, his pristine white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked tired, but the moment his gray eyes locked onto the canvas, an intense, predatory focus washed over his features. "I'm sorry," I stammered, suddenly hyper-aware of my messy hair and paint-stained clothes. "I didn't hear you come in. I made a mess." "Don't apologize," Liam said, stepping into the solarium. He completely ignored the paint splatters on the floor, walking right up to the canvas. He studied it with the critical, deeply appreciative eye of a master architect examining a flawless blueprint. You captured the storm, but you gave it a foundation. He turned his gaze from the painting to me. His eyes swept over my paint-smeared face, lingering on my lips for a fraction of a second before meeting my eyes. You look alive, Julian. It suits you. A heavy, charged silence stretched between us. The air in the room suddenly felt incredibly thin. The gala, Liam finally said, breaking the spell. His voice returned to its commanding, professional cadence. My styling team is waiting in the guest wing. They have everything prepared for you. Tonight is crucial. We are announcing our engagement to the board, the press, and the city's elite. And my parents? I asked, the familiar knot of anxiety instantly returning to my stomach. Liam's jaw tightened. They will be there. Remember what I told you last night. You belong to me now. They cannot touch you. 2 hours later, I stood in front of a massive gilded mirror, completely unrecognizable. The styling team had worked a miracle. I was wearing a bespoke, midnight blue velvet tuxedo jacket with sharp black lapels, perfectly tailored to hug my waist and accentuate my shoulders. My hair was styled back, neat but with a touch of effortless artistic flair. The platinum ring on my finger felt heavy and significant. Liam walked into the dressing room, already in his classic, razor-sharp black tuxedo. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. The team of stylists immediately bowed their heads and scurried out of the room, sensing the sheer intensity radiating from their boss. Liam walked up behind me, our eyes meeting in the mirror. He reached out, his large hands resting gently on my waist. The heat of his palms burned through the velvet of my jacket. "You are breathtaking," he murmured, his voice low and vibrating with possessive pride. They won't know what hit them. The ride to the gala was a blur of nervous energy. When the Rolls-Royce pulled up to the grand entrance of the museum hosting the event, the sheer volume of flashing cameras and shouting reporters was blinding. "Stay close," Liam commanded. He stepped out of the car first, immediately buttoning his jacket with a smooth, intimidating grace. Then, he turned and offered me his hand. The moment my fingers intertwined with his, a collective gasp rippled through the press line. The untouchable iceberg of the business world, Liam Sterling, was not only arriving with a +1, but he was holding his hand with a fierce, unmistakable possessiveness. We walked down the red carpet, bathed in the strobe lights of 100 cameras. Liam's presence was a physical shield. He guided me through the chaos with a firm hand on the small of my back, his stormy eyes glaring down any photographer who dared to step too close. Inside, the ballroom was a glittering ocean of crystal chandeliers, flowing champagne, and the city's most powerful billionaires. The moment Liam and I entered, the conversations died down. Every eye in the room turned to us. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Smile, Julian," Liam whispered, his lips brushing the shell of my ear, sending a jolt of pure electricity straight down my spine. "You own this room." Before I could even process the sensation, a sharp, familiar voice sliced through the elegant music. "Julian." Finally. I turned, my blood running instantly cold. My parents, Arthur and Eleanor, were marching toward us, holding champagne flutes like weapons. My father's smile was entirely fake, reaching nowhere near his cold eyes. "Arthur." "Eleanor," Liam greeted them, his voice perfectly polite but utterly devoid of warmth. He did not let go of my waist. "Liam, wonderful to see you," my mother simpered, though her eyes immediately darted to me with a critical glare. "Julian, look at you. Goodness, that velvet is a bit theatrical, isn't it? Try not to stand out too much tonight. We don't want to distract from Liam's foundation announcements." I shrank back instinctively. 3 years of conditioning kicked in, the constant need to make myself smaller so others could shine. Noah had done it to me, and my parents had laid the groundwork long before him. "And I trust you've put away those messy paints now that you have real responsibilities," my father added, taking a sip of his champagne. "Liam, we assume he's agreed to drop that ridiculous art degree to focus on his duties as your partner? We tried to talk sense into him for years, but the boy is stubborn." I opened my mouth to apologize, to default to my old defense mechanisms, but before I could utter a single syllable, Liam stepped forward. The movement was slight, but it placed him half an inch in front of me, effectively shielding me from my parents. The temperature in our immediate circle seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Arthur," Liam said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, yet it carried the lethal edge of a sharpened blade. "I believe there has been a profound misunderstanding." My father's fake smile faltered. "Liam, Julian's velvet jacket was selected by me because he is the center of my attention and therefore the center of this room, Liam stated, his gray eyes locked onto my father with unblinking intensity. As for his art, he will not be dropping his degree. In fact, the Sterling estate has just finalized the purchase of the old Roth building on Fifth Avenue. It is currently being gutted to build Julian's private gallery. It will be the most heavily funded contemporary art space in this city. My mother gasped, practically choking on her champagne. Hey, a gallery? Liam, be reasonable. That's tens of millions of dollars for a hobby. It is an investment in my fiancé's brilliance, Liam interrupted, his voice echoing with absolute authority. I suggest you learn to speak to him with the respect his new name commands. If you ever refer to his passion as a ridiculous hobby again, I will personally pull Sterling Architecture out of your downtown development project, and I will bankrupt your firm by Friday. Am I understood? Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. My parents stared at Liam, their faces pale and completely drained of their usual arrogance. They looked at me, realizing for the first time that I was no longer their pawn. I was untouchable. Crystal clear, Liam. My father managed to choke out, grabbing my mother's arm. We will leave you two to enjoy the evening. They practically fled into the crowd. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I looked up at Liam, completely breathless. He had just threatened to destroy a multi-million-dollar business alliance just to defend my honor. Liam turned to me, the lethal coldness in his eyes instantly melting away as he looked down at my face. He lifted his hand, gently tracing the line of my jaw with his thumb. No one makes you small anymore, Julian, he whispered, completely ignoring the hundreds of people staring at us. Not Noah. Not your parents. No one. Right there, under the glittering chandeliers and the flashing cameras of the city's elite, I realized the terrifying truth. I hadn't just signed a business contract to escape a broken heart. I was falling, completely and helplessly, for the iceberg who had decided to become my shield. End of Part 4. Part 5, the masterpiece of us. The ride back to the penthouse from the gala was wrapped in a heavy, charged silence that felt entirely different from our first night. The air in the back of the Rolls-Royce was thick with unsaid words, thick with the lingering adrenaline of Liam systematically dismantling my parents' arrogance. Every time the streetlights flickered across the leather interior, I caught Liam staring at me. His stormy gray eyes were dark, tracking the steady rise and fall of my chest beneath the midnight blue velvet jacket he had chosen for me. I looked down at my left hand, resting on my thigh. The platinum ring caught the faint light, a heavy, permanent reminder of the shift in my universe. For 22 years, I had been an afterthought. I had been a pawn for my parents' social climbing and an accessory to Noah's ego. Tonight, I had been the center of the room. I had been defended by a man who commanded empires, simply because I was his. When the private elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, the quiet sanctuary of the massive apartment washed over me. Liam shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it carelessly over the back of a pristine white sofa, and loosened his silk bow tie with a tired, elegant pull. "Would you like a drink?" Liam asked, walking toward the backlit crystal bar in the corner of the living room. His voice was a low, soothing rumble in the quiet space. "You handled yourself impeccably tonight, Julian. I know confronting your parents was not easy." "I didn't confront them," I replied softly, walking further into the room. "You did." Liam poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, the ice clinking musically against the crystal. He turned, offering me one. "I merely set the boundaries. You were the one who held your ground. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold into yourself the way they expected you to." I took the glass, my fingers brushing against his warm skin. A jolt of electricity sparked at the contact, making my breath hitch. I took a slow sip of the bourbon, letting the liquid burn a path of warmth down my throat to steady my nerves. "Why did you do it, Liam?" I asked, looking up at him. The question had been burning in my chest all night. "You threatened a multi-million-dollar development deal. You put your own company's profits on the line just to make my father apologize to me. That's not a calculated business move. That's reckless." Liam set his glass down on the marble counter. He took a slow, deliberate step toward me, closing the distance between us until I had to tilt my head back to look at him. His towering presence wasn't intimidating anymore. It was an anchor. "When I placed that ring on your finger, Julian, I made a vow," Liam said, his voice dropping to an incredibly intimate whisper. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the development deals. I care that the person wearing my name is treated with absolute reverence. They looked at you as if you were a disappointment. They looked at you the way Noah did. He raised his hand, his long, calloused fingers gently cupping my cheek. The contrast of his rough thumb brushing against my skin made my heart hammer violently against my ribs. "You are not a disappointment," Liam murmured, his gray eyes burning with an intensity that stripped away all my defenses. "You are brilliant. You are loyal. And you are mine. I will burn down every building in this city before I let anyone make you feel small again." The air was suddenly pulled from my lungs. The sheer, overwhelming weight of his devotion was intoxicating. I leaned into his touch, my eyes fluttering shut for a fraction of a second as I absorbed the warmth of his palm. "Thank you," I breathed out, opening my eyes to find him staring at my lips. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he was going to kiss me. The tension between us was a physical, vibrating cord, pulled taut and ready to snap. But Liam Sterling was a man of infinite discipline. He let out a ragged, controlled breath and slowly stepped back, his hand dropping from my face. "Get some rest, Julian. Tomorrow, my driver will take you to the Roth building. I want you to see your gallery. It's time you started building your own empire." 3 days later, the smell of sawdust, wet concrete, and rain hung heavy in the air. I stood in the center of the massive, gutted first floor of the Roth building on 5th Avenue, wearing a white hard hat over my messy hair and clutching a tube of rolled-up architectural blueprints to my chest. The space was breathtaking. Exposed brick walls stretched up to 20-foot ceilings, and massive arched windows let in floods of natural light. It was a raw, empty canvas, waiting for me to bring it to life. "Mr. Sterling," the site foreman, a burly man named Davis, called out respectfully as he approached me. Hearing my new name still sent a thrill down my spine, but I was slowly growing into it. "The electrical team is ready to map out the track lighting for the main exhibition wall. We just need your final approval on the placement." "Of course, let's take a look," I said, unrolling the blueprints across a makeshift plywood table. For the past 3 hours, I had been in my element. Liam hadn't just bought me a building. He had given me complete creative control. I was directing the contractors, choosing the finishes, and designing the flow of the gallery. I wasn't just Julian, the heartbroken art student anymore. I was Julian Sterling, a visionary building a sanctuary for artists who had been overlooked, just like I had been. As Davis walked away to coordinate with the electricians on the upper floor, a sudden, heavy silence fell over the main room. The construction noise temporarily ceased as the crew went on their lunch break, leaving me alone in the vast, dusty space. I walked toward the back of the gallery, visualizing where I would hang my first collection, when a sharp, scraping sound echoed from the shadows near the service entrance. I stopped. "Hello. Davis, did you forget something?" A figure stepped out from behind a stack of drywall. My blood ran instantly cold. It was Noah. But he didn't look like the golden boy of the university swim team anymore. He looked completely unhinged. His clothes were rumpled, his blonde hair was greasy and unkempt, and there were dark, purple bags under his bloodshot eyes. He smelled strongly of stale alcohol and desperation. "Look at you," Noah sneered, his voice echoing eerily in the empty building. He took a slow, unsteady step toward me. "Playing the big, important boss in your $1 million playground. Having fun, Jules." My heart pounded, but I forced my feet to stay planted. "How did you get past the security detail outside?" "I slipped through the delivery alley," Noah spat, taking another step closer. "They're too busy kissing your husbands, asked to pay attention. You ruined my life, Julian. Do you know what happened yesterday? The University Athletic Board completely revoked my scholarship. They kicked me off the team. And nobody will tell me why, except for some vague conduct violations that mysteriously appeared on my record." He pointed a shaking finger at me, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "It was him. It was your psycho billionaire. He pulled the strings. He took everything from me." A wave of profound realization washed over me. Liam had promised me that Noah's career would be dismantled if he ever came near me again, but it seemed Liam hadn't even waited for a second offense. He had completely obliterated Noah's future, systematically and quietly, from the shadows. A month ago, I would have felt pity. I would have felt guilty, instantly apologizing and trying to fix the mess for him. But standing here, in the building that represented my future, looking at the man who had so casually destroyed my past, I felt absolutely nothing. The ghost was finally exorcised. "He didn't take everything from you, Noah," I said, my voice steady, ringing out with a cold, hard authority that surprised even me. You threw it away. You thought you were untouchable. You thought there were no consequences for using people. Shut up, Noah roared, lunging forward with a sudden, violent burst of speed. He grabbed the collar of my jacket, shoving me hard against the exposed brick wall. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, and the blueprints scattered across the dusty floor. Noah pinned me against the brick, his face inches from mine, his breath reeking of cheap vodka. You're going to call him, Noah hissed, his grip tightening around my throat. You're going to call Sterling right now and tell him to back off, or I swear to God, Julian, I will. He didn't get to finish the sentence. I didn't freeze. I didn't wait for a savior to burst through the doors. The strength Liam had been pouring into me over the last week suddenly ignited in my veins. I brought my knee up hard, slamming it directly into Noah's stomach. Noah gasped, his eyes going wide with shock, and his grip on my collar loosened. I didn't hesitate. I shoved him backward with all my strength, and as he stumbled, I stepped forward and delivered a sharp, cracking slap directly across his face. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty gallery. Noah crashed into the plywood table, collapsing onto the floor in a pathetic, groaning heap. Do not ever touch me, I breathed out, my chest heaving, my hands curled into fists at my sides. I am not the broken boy you cheated on. I am Julian Sterling, and you are nothing but dust. Julian. The heavy, frantic sound of dress shoes pounding against the concrete floor echoed from the main entrance. I turned to see Liam sprinting toward me, a look of pure, unadulterated terror and lethal fury twisting his handsome features. Behind him, 3 massive security guards flooded into the room. Liam reached me in a heartbeat. He completely ignored Noah, grabbing my shoulders and spinning me around to inspect me. His stormy eyes darted over every inch of my face, his hands shaking slightly as they gripped my arms. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? I swear to God I will kill him, Liam growled, his voice trembling with a terrifying primal rage. He pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me like a vice, shielding me from the rest of the world. I'm okay, I gasped, burying my face in the crook of his neck, breathing in the scent of cedarwood that instantly calmed my racing heart. Liam, I'm okay. I handled it. Liam pulled back just enough to look at me, his chest heaving. He looked past me at Noah, who was currently being dragged to his feet and violently restrained by the security detail. Get him out of my sight, Liam barked at the guards, his voice turning into ice. Hand him over to the police. Trespassing and attempted assault. Ensure the charges stick. As Noah was dragged kicking and screaming out of the gallery, the heavy doors slammed shut, plunging the space back into a sudden, profound silence. It was just Liam and me. Liam looked back down at me. The lethal fury in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by an overwhelming wave of relief, and something else, something dark, burning, and incredibly passionate. He looked at my flushed cheeks, my messy hair, and the fiery defiance still blazing in my eyes. You fought back, Liam whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I had never heard from him before. Absolute awe. My beautiful, fierce boy. You fought back. I told you, I murmured, my gaze dropping to his lips. I'm not broken anymore. I didn't wait for him to ask for permission. I didn't wait for him to step back and maintain his disciplined boundaries. I reached up, threading my fingers into Liam's perfectly styled dark hair, and pulled him down to me. Our lips crashed together. It wasn't gentle, and it wasn't hesitant. It was an explosion. Liam let out a low, ragged groan, his massive hands instantly dropping to my waist, pulling my body flush against his. He kissed me with a desperate, starving intensity, his mouth completely taking over mine, sweeping away the last lingering shadows of my past. I opened for him, tasting the sharp, dark tang of his coffee and the intoxicating heat of his absolute devotion. His hands slid up my back, gripping me tight, anchoring me to the earth as the entire universe shifted on its axis. The contract, the arranged marriage, the business deals, they all burned to ash in the fire of that single, world-shattering kiss. End of Part 5. Part 6. The Empire's Shadow. When we finally broke apart, the silence in the gutted gallery was deafening, save for the ragged, uneven sound of our breathing. My hands were still tangled in Liam's dark hair, my chest heaving against his. Liam's eyes, usually a calm, impenetrable gray, were entirely blown out, darkened with a storm of raw, unfiltered desire. He rested his forehead against mine, his massive hands gripping my waist as if he were terrified I might suddenly vanish into thin air. Julian, Liam breathed, his voice a gravelly, trembling whisper that sent a fresh wave of shivers down my spine. If you kiss me like that again, I am not going to be able to stop. And I promised myself I would do this right. I promised I wouldn't rush you. I'm the one who kissed you. I reminded him softly, my thumb tracing the sharp line of his jaw. The stubble there was rough, a stark contrast to the polished CEO image he presented to the world. I'm not rushing, Liam. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Liam closed his eyes, a profound shudder running through his massive frame. It was as if the weight of the entire world, the burden of his empire, and the anxiety of protecting me all melted away in that single moment. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead, wrapping me in a fierce, protective embrace. We stood there in the dust and the echoes of the raw building, completely anchored to one another. The ride back to the penthouse that afternoon was a fundamental shift in our reality. The invisible barrier that had separated us, the professional distance of our arranged contract, was entirely shattered. Liam sat close to me in the back of the Rolls-Royce, his arm resting securely around my shoulders, my head leaning against his chest. I could hear the steady, rhythmic beating of his heart beneath his crisp dress shirt. It was the most soothing sound in the world. Over the next 3 weeks, our life settled into a beautiful, vibrant rhythm. The construction on the Roth building accelerated, and I spent my days conceptualizing the gallery's grand opening, reviewing portfolios of emerging artists, and painting in my sunlit solarium. Liam managed his multi-billion-dollar architecture firm with his usual ruthless efficiency, but the moment he stepped through the penthouse doors at the end of the day, the iceberg melted. Our evenings were spent in a quiet, domestic bliss I had never known. We cooked dinner together in the massive kitchen, drinking wine and laughing as Liam, who could design a 100-story skyscraper blindfolded, hopelessly struggled to follow a simple pasta recipe. We talked for hours about our dreams, our fears, and our pasts. He learned about my childhood, the constant pressure from my parents to be a perfect, silent accessory. I learned about his terrifying ascent to power, taking over sterling architecture at 22 after his father's sudden passing, and the immense, isolating burden of keeping the sharks at bay. We shared a bed now. There was no pressure, no demands, just the profound intimacy of sleeping wrapped in each other's arms, completely safe. But in the world of the ultra-wealthy, peace is usually just the quiet before the storm. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Liam was in a critical board meeting downtown, navigating a hostile takeover of a rival firm. I was in the penthouse solarium, wearing one of Liam's oversized cashmere sweaters, carefully applying a layer of gold leaf to a massive abstract canvas. The classical music playing softly from the speakers was suddenly interrupted by the sharp, authoritative chime of the private elevator doors opening. I frowned, setting down my brush. Liam wasn't supposed to be home for another 4 hours, and he always texted if his schedule changed. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked out of the suite, down the long hallway toward the foyer. Standing in the center of the living room, analyzing the minimalist decor with a look of absolute disdain, was a woman I recognized instantly from the society pages. Victoria Sterling, Liam's mother. She was a striking, terrifying woman in her late 50s, dressed in a flawless, bone-white Chanel suit. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, icy blonde chignon, and her gray eyes, the exact same shade as Liam's, but entirely devoid of his warmth, were sharp enough to draw blood. She was flanked by 2 massive men in dark suits, who looked less like bodyguards and more like mercenaries. "Mrs. Sterling," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. I instinctively stood taller, burying the sudden spike of anxiety deep in my chest. Victoria turned slowly, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her gaze swept over me, taking in my paint-stained hands, my bare feet, and the oversized sweater that clearly belonged to her son. Her perfectly painted red lips curled into a cold, mocking smile. "Julian," she said, her voice smooth and venomous. I must admit, when Arthur and Eleanor told me their son was an artist, I pictured someone with a bit more refinement. "You look like a charity case my son brought in from the rain." I didn't flinch. Liam had taught me better than that. "Liam isn't here, Victoria. He's at the board meeting. If you needed to speak with him, you could have gone to his office." "I didn't come to speak with my son. I came to speak with his latest liability," she replied, stepping closer. The mercenaries remained perfectly still by the elevator. "Liam is a brilliant boy, but he has always had a tragic flaw. He likes to rescue wounded things. He found you crying at a gallery, broken by some foolish college athlete, and he decided to play the hero. It's pathetic, really. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice perfectly level. Liam and I are partners. We are building a life together. Victoria let out a sharp, genuine laugh. It was a terrifying sound. A life? Julian, you are a phase. A brief, expensive distraction. Liam is the CEO of a global empire. He needs a spouse who understands the complexities of our world, someone who brings political power and corporate alliances to the table. You bring finger paints and a pathetic sob story. She reached into her pristine designer handbag and pulled out a sleek, black leather checkbook. She uncapped a gold fountain pen and quickly scribbled across the paper, the scratchy sound loud in the tense silence. She tore the check out and held it up between her manicured fingers. $50 million, Victoria stated, her eyes locked onto mine with lethal intensity. Tax-free. Transferred to any offshore account you desire. You will pack your bags, leave this penthouse today, and annul the marriage contract before Liam returns. You can take your little gallery with you. Consider it severance pay. I stared at the slip of paper. $50 million. It was an unfathomable amount of wealth. Noah would have sold his soul, his mother, and his right arm for a fraction of that money. My parents would have thrown a parade. But looking at the check, all I felt was a deep, burning insult. She was trying to put a price tag on the man who had given me my life back. She was trying to buy the safest, most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. I walked slowly toward her, closing the distance until I was standing barely a foot away. I didn't look at the mercenaries. I looked directly into the icy eyes of the sterling matriarch. I reached out and took the check from her fingers. Victoria smiled, a look of triumphant disgust washing over her face. Smart boy. I knew you were just a gold digger playing a long con. Before she could finish her sentence, I gripped the edges of the heavy paper and tore it straight down the middle. Victoria's breath hitched, her eyes widening in genuine shock as I stacked the halves and tore them again, and again, until the $50 million bribe was nothing but confetti in my palms. I let the pieces fall like snow onto the polished hardwood floor between us. I think you misunderstand the situation, Victoria, I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, dangerous register that I had learned from watching her son. I didn't marry Liam for his money. My family has their own fortune, which I walked away from. I married Liam because he is the only person in this world who looks at me and sees an equal. Her face flushed with a sudden, violent rage. You arrogant little brat. You think you can survive in our world? I will destroy your reputation. I will make sure your ridiculous gallery never opens its doors. I sit on the board of sterling architecture. I can make Liam's life a living hell if he stays with you. You can try, I replied, not backing down a single inch. But if you go after me, you go after him. And we both know Liam doesn't lose. Is there a problem here? The voice boomed through the penthouse like a crack of thunder. Victoria and I both spun around. Liam was standing by the secondary private entrance, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened, and his briefcase gripped tightly in his massive hand. His chest was heaving slightly, and his gray eyes were locked onto the torn pieces of the check on the floor before snapping up to his mother. The temperature in the room plummeted to absolute zero. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like an apex predator who had just found a threat in his den. Liam, darling. Victoria recovered quickly, smoothing her jacket and plastering on a fake, motherly smile. You're home early. I was just having a lovely chat with your arrangement. Liam dropped his briefcase. The heavy thud echoed like a gunshot. He walked across the room with terrifying, measured strides, completely ignoring his mother, and stopped directly in front of me. His large hands came up to cup my face, his thumbs gently brushing my cheekbones. Did she hurt you? Liam asked me, his voice a low, vibrating growl that ignored everyone else in the room. No, I answered softly, reaching up to cover his hands with my own. I handled it. Liam looked down at the shredded check on the floor. A dark, incredibly proud smirk briefly touched his lips before his expression hardened into pure, lethal ice. He turned to face his mother, stepping slightly in front of me, shielding me with his massive frame. Victoria, Liam said, his voice deadly calm. I informed you when my father died that if you ever interfered with my personal life, I would freeze your assets and remove you from the board. Did you think I was making a suggestion? Victoria scoffed, crossing her arms. Don't be ridiculous, Liam. I am protecting the family legacy. This boy is a liability. He brings nothing to our empire. He will make you look weak. He makes me human, Liam roared, the sudden volume of his voice making the mercenaries flinch. He is my husband. He is the only thing in my life that isn't a transaction. And you just tried to buy him. Liam pulled his phone from his pocket and hit a single speed dial button, putting it on speaker. It rang once before his head of security answered. Yes, Mr. Sterling? Marcus, Liam ordered, his eyes locked onto his mother's pale face. Revoke Victoria Sterling's access to the corporate towers. Freeze her primary discretionary accounts, and inform the legal team to draft the paperwork to strip her of her voting rights on the board. Effective immediately. Liam, you can't be serious. Victoria gasped, her aristocratic composure completely shattering. I am your mother. You would destroy your own flesh and blood over a boy you met a month ago. Liam hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. He turned back to me, wrapping his arm securely around my waist and pulling me flush against his side. I told you once, Victoria, Liam said softly, looking down at me with an ocean of devotion in his eyes before glaring back at her. I don't make investments that fail. And Julian is the greatest masterpiece of my life. Now get out of my home, before I have my security team throw you out. End of Part 6. Part 7, The Canvas of Truth. The heavy mahogany doors slid shut with a definitive, resounding thud, sealing Victoria Sterling and her hired mercenaries out of our sanctuary forever. The silence that instantly flooded the massive penthouse was absolute, thick with the lingering electricity of the confrontation. The shredded pieces of the $50 million check still littered the polished hardwood floor like the casualties of a silent war. Liam didn't move for a long moment. He stood perfectly still, his broad back facing me, his massive chest rising and falling with heavy, jagged breaths. The ruthless, untouchable iceberg of the corporate world had just dismantled his own mother's power to protect me, and the sheer magnitude of that sacrifice hung heavily in the air between us. Liam, I whispered, taking a slow step toward him. He flinched slightly, the first crack in his flawless armor I had ever witnessed. Slowly, he turned to face me. The lethal fury that had darkened his stormy gray eyes just moments ago was completely gone. In its place was an exhaustion so profound it made my heart ache, mixed with a terrifying, raw vulnerability. When I stepped out of that elevator, Liam started, his voice a gravelly, trembling rumble that barely carried across the room. He ran a shaking hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, ruining its precision. When I saw her holding that checkbook, for a fraction of a second, Julian, my heart stopped. I thought she had won. I thought you were going to take it and walk out that door, and I wouldn't have been able to blame you. The admission tore at my chest. This powerful man, who commanded empires and crushed rivals without a second thought, was terrified of losing me. I closed the distance between us, stepping directly into his personal space. I reached out, resting my palms flat against the crisp fabric of his dress shirt, feeling the frantic, hammering rhythm of his heart beneath my hands. Look at me, I commanded softly, channeling the very same steady authority he had taught me to embrace. Liam's gray eyes dropped to meet mine, wide and incredibly unguarded. I am not Noah, and I am not your mother, I said, my voice steady and completely absolute. I don't have a price tag, Liam. There isn't enough money in this entire city to make me walk away from you. You are my home now. You are my foundation. I am not going anywhere. Liam let out a ragged, breaking sound, a sound of pure relief that had been trapped in his chest for a lifetime. He wrapped his massive arms around my waist and pulled me against him, burying his face in the crook of my neck. I held him tightly, my fingers tracing the tense, rigid muscles of his back until I felt him finally, truly relax into my embrace. We stood there in the center of the foyer, surrounded by the torn remnants of a bribe, completely anchoring each other to the earth. 2 months later, the city was completely consumed by the grand opening of the Julian Sterling Gallery. The transformation of the gutted Roth building on Fifth Avenue was nothing short of a miracle. Liam's architectural team had worked around the clock, turning the raw brick and concrete into a breathtaking, multi-level sanctuary of modern art. The space was bathed in warm, calculating light, designed specifically to highlight the emotional depth of the canvases hanging on the walls. Outside, a velvet rope held back a thrashing ocean of paparazzi and reporters. A line of sleek Blacktown cars stretched down the block, depositing the wealthiest, most influential figures in the city onto the red carpet. Inside the main exhibition hall, the air buzzed with the clinking of crystal champagne flutes and the low, sophisticated hum of high society. But tonight, they weren't here to discuss corporate mergers or real estate developments. They were here to look at my soul, poured out onto 40 massive canvases. I stood near the grand staircase, wearing a bespoke, pure white silk suit that Liam had commissioned for me. It was a stark, intentional contrast to the traditional black tuxedos of the billionaires surrounding me. I was the light of the room, exactly as Liam had promised I would be. Mr. Sterling, the critics from the Times are absolutely enraptured by the Chaos and Indigo series in the East Wing. Claire, my newly appointed gallery director, whispered excitedly as she handed me a fresh glass of sparkling water. We've already had 7 private inquiries regarding purchases. The starting bids are doubling the estimates. Thank you, Claire. Let's hold off on any sales until tomorrow. Tonight is just about the art. I smiled, though my eyes were constantly scanning the crowded room for one specific person. I spotted him near the center of the hall, speaking with the mayor. Liam was dressed in his signature midnight black tuxedo, looking dangerously handsome and utterly commanding. Even while engaged in a conversation with the city's most powerful politician, his stormy gray eyes flicked over the crowd, finding me with laser precision. He offered me a small, incredibly proud smile that made my stomach flutter just as violently as it had on the day we met. Needing a brief moment to catch my breath away from the overwhelming praise and the flashing cameras, I slipped away from the main floor and headed up the glass staircase toward my private office on the mezzanine level. The office was quiet, soundproofed against the loud chatter of the gala below. I walked over to my massive oak desk and let out a long, happy sigh. I had done it. I had proven my parents wrong. I had proven Noah wrong. But most importantly, I had proven to myself that I was capable of greatness. Resting on the center of my desk was a leather-bound folio that Claire had left for me. It contained the inventory lists, the provenance documents, and the insurance records for the pieces we had brought in for the permanent collection. I opened the folio, absent-mindedly flipping through the heavy parchment pages, until my eyes snagged on a specific document near the back. It was a certificate of authenticity for a painting titled The Boy in the Rain. My breath hitched, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. I knew that painting. It was a moody, raw self-portrait I had painted during my freshman year of college. It was the darkest period of my life. Noah had just forced me to move into the frat house. My parents had cut off my tuition because I refused to change my major to finance, and I had been practically starving. I had sold that painting to an anonymous buyer online for $2,000, just enough to pay Noah's share of the rent and keep me enrolled in my classes. I had cried the day I shipped it away, feeling like I had sold a piece of my actual soul. My eyes scanned the provenance document, tracing the ownership history. Purchased, October 14th, 3 years ago. Buyer, LS Holdings. Parent company, Sterling Architecture. I stared at the paper, the words blurring as the blood rushed to my ears. LS Holdings. Liam Sterling. He hadn't just noticed me at the university gallery opening a few months ago. He had been watching me, supporting me, from the shadows for 3 years. He was the anonymous buyer who had kept me from dropping out of college. He was the invisible safety net that had caught me when my parents had let me fall. The door to the office clicked open. I looked up, tears already brimming in my eyes. Liam walked in, closing the heavy door behind him, instantly silencing the noise of the gala. He took one look at my face, then at the open folio on the desk, and he froze. The confident, untouchable billionaire suddenly looked incredibly exposed. "You bought it," I whispered, my voice shaking as I pointed to the document. "You bought The Boy in the Rain. 3 years ago. Long before the arranged marriage. Long before I even knew you existed." Liam slowly walked toward the desk. He didn't try to lie, and he didn't try to deflect. He stopped a few feet away from me, his hands resting on the back of a leather guest chair. "I was inspecting the university grounds for a new library commission," Liam said, his voice quiet, stripped of all its usual corporate armor. "I walked past the student art studios. The door was propped open. You were inside, covered in charcoal, painting that canvas with a desperation that broke my heart just looking at it. You were crying. A tear slipped down my cheek. I remembered that day. Noah had yelled at me for not doing his laundry, and I had hidden in the studio to escape him. I couldn't approach you," Liam continued, his stormy eyes dark with memory. "You were just a student, and I was a CEO 10 years older than you. I knew your family. I knew your father would use any connection between us to manipulate the board. So I walked away. but I couldn't get the sadness in your eyes out of my head. I had my assistant track down your student portfolio online. When you listed that painting for sale a month later, I had to have it. He walked around the chair, closing the distance between us. He reached out, gently wiping the tear from my cheek with his thumb. I hung it in my private study at the Penthouse, Liam murmured, his voice thick with emotion. For 3 years, I looked at that painting every single night. I watched your career from afar. I bought pieces anonymously to ensure you always had funding. I told myself I was just being a patron of the arts. But the truth was, I fell in love with your soul through that canvas, Julian, long before I ever had the right to speak to you. The revelation hit me with the force of a freight train. Liam hadn't arranged this marriage as a simple business transaction. He hadn't just decided to play the hero on a whim. He had been secretly, quietly in love with me for years, protecting me from poverty while patiently waiting in the shadows. Why didn't you tell me? I choked out, wrapping my hands around his wrists. Because I didn't want you to feel obligated to me, Liam whispered, leaning his forehead against mine. When Noah broke your heart and your parents forced the marriage arrangement, it was my only chance to finally step into the light and claim you. But I wanted you to choose me for who I am now, not out of gratitude for a check I wrote 3 years ago. You idiot, I sobbed, a watery laugh escaping my lips. I threw my arms around his neck, pulling him into a desperate, crushing embrace. You brilliant, beautiful idiot. I already chose you. I choose you every single day. Liam let out a ragged breath, wrapping his massive arms around my waist and lifting me slightly off the floor, holding me as if I were the most precious, fragile masterpiece in existence. You are my entire world, Julian, Liam vowed, his voice vibrating against my chest. Downstairs, the city's elite were admiring the art I had created. But up here, in the quiet safety of his arms, I knew the truth. Liam Sterling was the canvas upon which my entire future was painted, and our love story was the true masterpiece. End of Part 7. Part 8, The Sterling Strike. The morning after the grand opening of the gallery, the city felt different. The air outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Penthouse was crisp and clear, the towering skyscrapers gleaming like monuments of glass and steel in the early dawn light. But inside our bedroom, the world was reduced to the warm, tangled weight of the heavy silk sheets and the steady, rhythmic breathing of the man sleeping beside me. I lay awake, my head resting against Liam's bare chest. The sheer magnitude of last night's revelation was still coursing through my veins. For 3 years, he had been my anonymous patron. For 3 years, the iceberg of the corporate world had been secretly nurturing the fragile flame of my art, long before he had the right to claim me as his husband. The knowledge settled deep in my bones, replacing any lingering doubt I had about this arranged marriage with an absolute, unshakable certainty. Liam shifted in his sleep, his massive arm instinctively tightening around my waist, pulling me flush against his side, even in unconsciousness. I tilted my head up, studying his face. Relaxed, with his dark hair mussed across his forehead and the harsh lines of his jaw softened by sleep, he looked breathtakingly vulnerable. Carefully, so as not to wake him, I slipped out of the bed. I pulled on one of his oversized dress shirts, the hem falling halfway down my thighs, and padded barefoot into the massive kitchen. Spread across the kitchen island were the early editions of the Sunday newspapers that Liam's assistant always had delivered. I picked up the Times. There, covering the entire front page of the arts and culture section, was a massive photograph of Liam and me standing on the glass staircase of my gallery. Liam was looking at me with an expression of such profound devotion that it completely shattered his ruthless public persona. The headline read in bold, black ink, "The Masterpiece and the Mogul, Julian Sterling's triumphant debut. I always knew you belonged on the front page." I jumped slightly, turning around. Liam was leaning against the kitchen doorway, wearing only a pair of dark silk sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his narrow hips. His broad chest and shoulders were heavily muscled, marked with the faint scars of a man who worked out with grueling intensity. His stormy gray eyes were fixed on me, dark and heavy with morning heat. The critics are calling the exhibition a once-in-a-generation revival of emotional portraiture. I smiled, walking toward him with the newspaper. And they spent a suspicious amount of time talking about how handsome my husband is. Liam chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in his chest. He reached out, pulling me into his arms and burying his face in the crook of my neck. He breathed in the scent of my skin, his lips pressing a soft, lingering kiss against my pulse point. "They can look," Liam murmured, his voice thick with sleep and possessive pride. But only I get to keep you. The quiet, domestic bliss was suddenly shattered by the sharp, urgent blaring of Liam's private cell phone, the secure line reserved strictly for corporate emergencies. Liam's entire demeanor shifted instantly. The soft, affectionate husband vanished, and the ruthless CEO slammed back into place. He stepped back, grabbing the phone from the counter. "Speak," Liam commanded, his voice turning into ice. I watched as the color slowly drained from his face, his jaw locking so tightly I could see the muscle ticking in his cheek. His stormy eyes darkened into a terrifying, lethal gray. "When did the transfer happen?" Liam demanded, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the marble edge of the counter. "I don't care about the loopholes, Marcus. How the hell did my mother bypass the freeze on her assets to sell her voting block? Lock down the boardroom. Call the legal team. I will be there in 20 minutes. He hung up the phone, tossing it onto the counter with a loud clatter. "Liam," I asked quietly, feeling a sudden chill creep into the warm kitchen. "What's wrong? Is it Victoria?" Liam closed his eyes, taking a deep, ragged breath before turning to face me. "My mother didn't just accept defeat when I locked her out of her accounts. She leveraged her remaining personal equity and sold her entire 15% voting share of Sterling Architecture." "Sold it?" I frowned, my heart accelerating. "To who?" "To Richard Vance." Liam spat the name as if it were poison. "He is the CEO of Vance Global, my biggest rival. He has been trying to acquire my firm for a decade. With my mother's shares, he now has enough leverage to call an emergency board meeting. He is trying to initiate a vote of no confidence to remove me as CEO." The air in the room vanished. Sterling Architecture wasn't just a company to Liam, it was his father's legacy. It was the empire he had bled for since he was 22 years old. To lose it to a rival, orchestrated by his own vengeful mother, would be devastating. "Liam, you have to stop them," I said, stepping forward and gripping his forearms. "I will," Liam vowed, his eyes blazing with a terrifying, predatory fire. "I am going to tear Vance apart. Julian, listen to me. I want you to stay here in the penthouse. Keep the security detail with you. Vance plays dirty, and my mother is entirely unhinged at this point. I do not want you anywhere near the crossfire. But, promise me," Liam commanded, his voice leaving absolutely no room for argument. He grabbed my face, pressing a hard, desperate kiss to my lips. "I will handle the wolves. You stay in the sanctuary." 10 minutes later, Liam was dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal suit, looking like a warlord marching into battle, and the private elevator doors closed behind him. I stood alone in the massive penthouse, the silence suddenly deafening. I looked down at the newspaper on the counter, at the bold headline declaring me a Sterling. "You stay in the sanctuary." The words echoed in my mind. 3 years ago, I would have hidden. I would have let Noah fight his own battles while I cowered in the shadows, waiting to be told what to do. But I wasn't that boy anymore. Liam had spent the last 2 months teaching me that I was powerful. He had spent 3 years investing in my strength. I picked up my own phone and dialed Claire, my gallery director. "Claire," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I need you to pull up the donor records from last night's gala. Specifically, I need the names of every board member of Sterling Architecture who attended and the exact amount of the private commissions they requested from me." "Right away, Mr. Sterling," Claire replied, sensing the urgency in my tone. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is going to be fine," I said, my eyes hardening. "Also, get the mayor's office on the line. Tell him the gallery's urban renewal project that he loves so much is under threat." I hung up the phone and walked straight to my expansive dressing room. I bypassed the soft sweaters and casual wear. I reached into the back of the closet and pulled out a bespoke, blood-red 3-piece suit. It was aggressive. It was arrogant. It was exactly what Liam would wear if he wanted to draw blood. I dressed with meticulous precision, styling my hair back to expose the sharp angles of my face. I slipped the heavy platinum and black diamond ring onto my finger, the metal cool and grounding against my skin. Victoria Sterling thought I was a liability. She thought I was a weak, bleeding heart who brought nothing to the empire. It was time to show her exactly what it meant to marry the Iceberg. The corporate headquarters of Sterling Architecture was a monolith of black glass in the center of the financial district. When my private car pulled up to the entrance, the security guards immediately scrambled to open the doors for me, recognizing the unmistakable authority radiating from my posture. I bypassed the reception desk, stepping into the private executive elevator, and swiped Liam's secondary keycard to access the top floor. When the doors slid open, the tension in the executive lobby was thick enough to cut with a knife. Liam's assistant looked up from her desk, her eyes widening in panic. "Mr. Sterling, you shouldn't be here," she whispered frantically, rushing toward me. "The board meeting is completely sealed. Mr. Vance brought a team of corporate lawyers, and Victoria is in there with them. It's a bloodbath." "Step aside, Sarah," I commanded, my voice echoing in the quiet lobby. I didn't stop walking. I reached the massive, frosted glass doors of the boardroom. Through the thick glass, I could hear the muffled, arrogant voice of Richard Vance, followed by the sharp, condescending laughter of Liam's mother. Without a moment of hesitation, I placed both hands on the heavy handles and shoved the doors open. The heavy thud of the doors hitting the walls silenced the entire room instantly. 20 of the most powerful executives in the city sat around a massive mahogany table. At the far end sat Richard Vance, a smug, silver-haired billionaire, with Victoria Sterling sitting victoriously at his right hand. But my eyes immediately found Liam. He was standing at the head of the table, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. He looked exhausted, like a lion fighting off a pack of hyenas. When he saw me standing in the doorway, his stormy gray eyes went wide with shock, followed immediately by a flash of absolute terror for my safety. "Julian," Liam snapped, his voice a warning growl. "What are you doing here?" "I'm sorry, is this a closed meeting?" I asked smoothly, stepping into the room. The click of my polished shoes echoed loudly against the marble floor. I didn't look at Liam. I kept my eyes locked dead onto Victoria. I was under the impression that major shareholders were required to be present for a vote of no confidence. Richard Vance sneered, leaning back in his leather chair. "This is a corporate boardroom, kid, not an art studio. You have no shares in this company, and you have no business being here. Security." "Actually, Richard, you are misinformed," I said, walking slowly down the length of the table. I reached into the breast pocket of my blood-red suit and pulled out a folded legal document, tossing it carelessly onto the polished mahogany in front of him. Vance frowned, picking up the paper. "Clause 7 of my marriage contract," I recited, my voice dripping with cold authority. "Upon the official opening of the Julian Sterling Gallery, 10% of the Sterling Estate's private equity was transferred into my name. That makes me the second largest individual shareholder in this room, right behind my husband." A collective gasp rippled through the board members. Victoria's smug smile vanished instantly, her face draining of all color. "You little brat," Victoria hissed, standing up. "That doesn't change the math. With my 15%, Vance has the majority vote. The board is turning against Liam." "Are they?" I asked, finally stopping directly beside Liam. I could feel the heat radiating off his massive frame. He was staring at me as if I had just descended from the heavens, utterly mesmerized by the fire in my eyes. I turned to face the board, planting my hands flat on the table. "Gentlemen, last night, 7 of you approached me at my gallery to commission private artwork for your estates. You wanted to align yourselves with the cultural renaissance my gallery is bringing to this city, a renaissance that is heavily backed by the mayor's office." I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen to display a forwarded email. 10 minutes ago, I had a lovely conversation with the mayor. I continued, my voice echoing with lethal precision. "If Richard Vance takes over this company, the city will instantly revoke all municipal zoning permits for the new downtown transit hub, a project this board has sunk $2 billion into. The mayor made it very clear. The city does business with Liam Sterling, not Vance." Panic instantly erupted around the table. The board members began whispering frantically, their eyes darting between Vance and the multi-billion-dollar threat I had just dropped on their heads. "He's bluffing," Vance shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "The mayor wouldn't tank a municipal project over an architect." "Call him," I challenged, sliding my phone across the table toward Vance. "Call the mayor right now, Richard. Let's see how much he likes your hostile takeover." Vance stared at the phone as if it were a live grenade. He didn't pick it up. He knew I had him cornered. I turned my gaze to the board members, leaning forward slightly. "You can follow Vance and Victoria and watch $2 billion evaporate before lunch. Or you can cast your vote of confidence in Liam, maintain the city contracts, and keep your fortunes intact. The choice is yours." The room was dead silent. One by one, the board members lowered their eyes, refusing to look at Vance. The oldest member of the board, a man named Harrison, cleared his throat. The motion for a vote of no confidence is withdrawn, Harrison stated firmly. Liam remains CEO. Mr. Vance, Victoria. I suggest you leave the premises. Victoria looked like she was going to faint. Her grand revenge had just been systematically dismantled in less than 5 minutes. Vance turned purple with rage, but realizing he had completely lost the room, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, Victoria trailing behind him in humiliated silence. As the doors shut behind them, the board members quickly filed out of the room, leaving Liam and me entirely alone in the massive executive boardroom. The silence stretched for a long, heavy moment. I suddenly felt my adrenaline crash. My hands began to shake slightly. I turned to look at Liam, terrified that I had overstepped, terrified that his pride would be wounded by me fighting his battle. Liam didn't say a word. He stared at me, his chest heaving, his stormy eyes completely blown out with an emotion so intense it felt like a physical weight in the room. He took a slow, predatory step toward me. "Julian," Liam breathed out, his voice a dark, vibrating rumble. Before I could respond, Liam grabbed the lapels of my blood-red suit and hoisted me effortlessly onto the edge of the mahogany boardroom table. He stepped between my legs, his massive hands gripping my thighs with a bruising, desperate strength. "You are," Liam growled, crashing his lips against mine, "the most terrifying, brilliant, magnificent creature I have ever seen." He kissed me with a starving, violent passion that knocked the breath completely out of my lungs. I tangled my fingers into his dark hair, pulling him closer, anchoring the iceberg to my soul. I was his masterpiece. But more importantly, I was his equal. End of Part 8. Part 9. The Foundation of Us. The adrenaline that had fueled my hostile takeover of the Sterling Architecture boardroom slowly began to recede, leaving behind a profound, vibrating warmth. I was still sitting on the edge of the polished mahogany table, my chest heaving against Liam's, my fingers hopelessly tangled in his dark hair. The sheer intensity of his kiss had completely rearranged my universe, grounding me in a reality where I wasn't just safe, I was worshipped. Liam pulled back just enough to look at me, his stormy gray eyes completely blown out, heavy with a mixture of awe and unchecked desire. His massive hands slid from my thighs up to my waist, his thumbs tracing the line of my ribs through the fabric of my blood-red suit. "You saved my empire, Julian," Liam whispered, his voice a gravelly, reverent rumble that echoed in the empty boardroom. "I spent my entire life building impenetrable walls, and you walked in, completely unarmed, and commanded the wolves to heel. I have never been more captivated by anyone in my entire life." "They were trying to take what's yours," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached up, smoothing the lapels of his discarded suit jacket that lay nearby, before resting my palms flat against his chest. "And you are mine, Liam. I wasn't going to let them destroy the man who spent 3 years quietly protecting my dreams." A slow, dangerously attractive smile spread across Liam's sharp features. He stepped back, offering me his hand to help me down from the table. "My mother and Richard Vance will never set foot in this building again. The legal team is already drawing up the permanent injunctions. But right now, Mr. Sterling, I do not want to think about corporate warfare. I want to take you somewhere." "Where?" I asked, my curiosity piquing as I let him pull me flush against his side. "Somewhere that has absolutely nothing to do with Sterling Architecture and everything to do with us," Liam replied, picking up his suit jacket and guiding me out of the boardroom. An hour later, Liam's private helicopter touched down on a sprawling, secluded stretch of coastline 2 hours north of the city. The noise of the rotors faded as the engine was killed, replaced by the rhythmic, soothing crash of ocean waves against jagged cliffs. I stepped out of the chopper, the salty sea breeze immediately tugging at my hair. The sky was painted in brilliant strokes of amber and violet as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. But it wasn't the sunset that stole the breath from my lungs. Perched on the edge of the cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean, was a house. It wasn't a cold glass and steel penthouse, nor was it a sterile, imposing mansion. It was a masterpiece of modern, organic architecture. Massive walls of natural stone blended seamlessly with warm, rich cedar wood. Expansive floor-to-ceiling windows caught the golden hour light, making the entire structure glow from within. It looked like a sanctuary, a place completely untouched by the ruthless demands of the city. "Liam," I gasped, my eyes wide as I took in the sprawling estate. "What is this?" Liam came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. When I bought The Boy in the Rain 3 years ago, I realized that the cold, minimalist world I lived in would eventually crush you. So, I bought this land. Every weekend, whenever I had a spare moment, I came out here. I designed it myself. I didn't use my firm's resources. I drafted every blueprint, selected every stone, and oversaw every beam. I built it for you. Tears immediately pricked the corners of my eyes. He had been building us a home long before he even knew if I would ever look at him. "Come inside," he murmured, taking my hand. The interior was even more breathtaking. It was open, airy, and flooded with natural light. The floors were heated, wide plank oak, and the furniture was plush, inviting, and deeply comfortable. But the true heart of the house was at the end of the main hallway. Liam pushed open a set of heavy, sliding wooden doors, revealing a massive room with 20-foot ceilings and a glass roof that offered an unobstructed view of the sky. "An art studio," I whispered, stepping into the massive space. It was 3 times the size of the solarium at the Penthouse. It was completely empty, waiting for me to fill it with color, life, and chaos. "The Penthouse is a fortress, Julian. It's where I go to hide from the world," Liam said, stepping up beside me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, forged iron key, pressing it into my palm. "But this is a home. There are no board meetings here. There are no society galas. It is just you, me, and the ocean. I want us to live here." I closed my fingers around the cold iron key, overwhelmed by the sheer, staggering weight of his love. Noah had always demanded that I fit into his cramped, chaotic world, constantly shrinking myself to make room for his ego. Liam had literally built an entire world from the ground up, specifically designed to give me the space to expand. I turned to him, cupping his face in my hands, and pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of sea salt and absolute devotion. "It's perfect. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Thank you." We spent the rest of the evening walking along the private beach, the ocean breeze wiping away the stress of the city. For the first time in my life, the future didn't look like a terrifying, uncertain void. It looked like a brilliant, vividly painted canvas. 2 days later, reality rudely intruded upon our sanctuary. I was at the gallery on 5th Avenue, reviewing the final lighting arrangements for a new exhibition, when Claire practically sprinted into the main viewing room. Her usually composed face was pale, and she was clutching her tablet tightly. "Mr. Sterling," Claire interrupted, her voice breathless. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there is a situation in the lobby. Your parents are here. They are demanding to see you, and they are causing quite a scene. Security is holding them back, but they are threatening to go to the press if you don't speak with them." My hands paused midair. Arthur and Eleanor. I hadn't seen or spoken to them since Liam had publicly humiliated them at the museum gala months ago. A cold spike of dread hit my stomach, the old, conditioned reflexes threatening to drag me backward. But then I felt the heavy weight of the platinum and black diamond ring on my finger. I wasn't their pawn anymore. "It's fine, Claire," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Send them up to my private office on the mezzanine. Tell security to stand outside the door. I will handle this." I walked up the glass staircase to my office, taking my seat behind the massive oak desk. I didn't have to wait long. The doors burst open, and my parents practically stumbled into the room. They looked terrible. The arrogant, untouchable aura of the wealthy elite had completely vanished. My father's suit looked rumpled, his face drawn and exhausted. My mother's usually pristine hair was slightly messy, and she was clutching her designer handbag as if it were a life preserver. "Julian," my father breathed, stepping forward, his eyes darting around the luxurious office. "Thank God. You have to help us." "Sit down, Arthur," I commanded, my voice flat, devoid of any familial warmth. I didn't call him Dad. He hadn't earned that title in years. They both froze, clearly shocked by my authoritative tone, but they slowly sank into the leather guest chairs across from my desk. "What do you want?" I asked, folding my hands over the polished oak. "It's Liam," my mother blurted out, her voice trembling with barely suppressed panic. "Julian, you have to talk to him. When Richard Vance's hostile takeover failed, Vance went completely bankrupt. He pulled all of his funding out of our downtown development project. And Liam has officially blacklisted our firm. No bank in the city will give us a loan. We are ruined, Julian. The estate is going into foreclosure by the end of the month." I stared at them, absorbing the information. They weren't here to apologize for how they had treated me. They weren't here to congratulate me on the massive success of my gallery. They were here because their bank accounts were empty, and they saw me as a highly lucrative ATM. You want me to ask my husband to lift his embargo on your company, I stated, the realization solidifying my resolve. You are a sterling now, my father pleaded, leaning forward desperately. You have his ear. You own 10% of the company. You can authorize a bailout. We are your family, Julian. We arranged this marriage for you. You owe us this. I owe you. I repeated, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping my chest. You didn't arrange this marriage to ensure my happiness. You arranged it because you wanted a political alliance with the Sterling Empire. You threw me to a man you thought was a ruthless shark, completely uncaring of whether he would break me, just so you could secure your development deals. Julian, please, my mother cried, reaching across the desk. We gave you everything. We raised you. I pulled my hands back, completely out of her reach. You didn't give me anything, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal, quiet register that I had learned perfectly from Liam. When I was starving in college because I wanted to be an artist instead of a banker, you cut me off. You let me suffer because I wouldn't obey you. Liam is the one who secretly bought my paintings to keep a roof over my head. Liam is the one who built this gallery. Liam is the one who protected me when my abusive ex-boyfriend attacked me. You were never my family. You were my wardens. My father's face flushed with anger, his old, demanding nature flaring up. You insolent, ungrateful. Finish that sentence, Arthur, and I will personally ensure that Sterling Architecture buys the debt on your foreclosed estate and turns it into a public parking lot, I snapped, standing up from my chair. The sheer dominance in my voice silenced him instantly. I walked around the desk, looking down at the two people who had made me feel so insignificant for my entire life. I am not giving you a bailout, I said with absolute finality. I will not ask Liam to compromise his business to save yours. Your arrogance ruined your company, not my husband. You are going to leave this gallery, and you are never going to contact me again. If you try to go to the press, Liam's legal team will bury you in defamation lawsuits until you are living on the street. Are we completely clear? My parents stared at me, their mouths open in stunned silence. The realization finally hit them. The obedient, terrified boy they had manipulated for 22 years was completely gone, replaced by a man who wielded power with the exact same precision as the mogul he had married. Without another word, my father stood up, grabbing my mother's arm. They looked broken, defeated, and entirely pathetic. They turned and walked out of the office, the heavy doors shutting behind them with a definitive click. I stood alone in the quiet office, taking a deep, cleansing breath. The last thread tethering me to my painful past had just been permanently severed. Suddenly, the door to my private office opened again. Liam stepped into the room. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, a knowing, incredibly proud smile playing on his lips. He walked over to me, setting the cups down on the desk, and wrapped his arms around my waist. I ran into Arthur and Eleanor in the lobby, Liam murmured, kissing the side of my head. They looked like they had just seen a ghost. They did, I replied, leaning back against his solid chest, completely relaxed. They saw the ghost of the boy I used to be. He doesn't exist anymore. Liam turned me around in his arms, his stormy eyes filled with a love so deep it was almost blinding. No, he doesn't. You are magnificent, Julian. Are you ready? For what? I asked, looking up at him. To finally make it real, Liam said, his voice dropping into a solemn, reverent whisper. We signed a contract to save you. But tomorrow, we stand in front of the world, and we make a vow because we choose to. Tomorrow is our wedding day. End of Part 9. Part 10, the masterpiece complete. The morning sun bled through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, golden ribbons of light across the wide plank oak floors of our cliffside sanctuary. I woke to the rhythmic, soothing sound of the ocean waves crashing against the jagged rocks below. The space beside me in the massive king-sized bed was empty, the sheets already cool, but the lingering scent of cedarwood and dark coffee told me Liam hadn't been gone long. I sat up, pulling the heavy linen duvet around my waist, and looked toward the mahogany bedside table. Resting there, exactly as it had on my very first morning in his world, was a cream-colored piece of stationery. But this time, it wasn't a set of cold, protective instructions from a distant CEO. It was a promise from the man who owned my soul. Julian, I spent my entire life designing buildings to withstand the fiercest storms, never realizing that all I truly needed was a home. I am waiting for you by the water. Take your time. I have already waited 3 years. I can wait a few more hours. But hurry, because my heart cannot take much more anticipation. Yours completely and eternally. L. A soft, tearful smile broke across my face. I traced my thumb over his sharp, elegant handwriting, the heavy platinum and black diamond ring catching the morning light. Today wasn't about contracts. It wasn't about mergers, parents, or escaping a broken past. Today was about choice. I threw off the covers and walked into the massive, sunlit dressing room. Claire, my gallery director and now one of my closest friends, was already there, meticulously steaming the final wrinkles out of my wedding suit. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Claire beamed, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Are you ready for the biggest day of your life?" "I've never been more ready for anything," I answered, my voice steady and certain. The suit Liam had commissioned for me was nothing short of a sartorial masterpiece. It was a tailored, pure ivory silk blend three-piece suit, designed to catch the coastal breeze and flow with an effortless, ethereal grace. It was the exact opposite of the heavy, dark armor Liam wore to battle in the corporate world. I was the light to his shadow. As I stood in front of the full-length gilded mirror, adjusting my silver cuffs, I barely recognized the man looking back at me. Gone was the anxious, terrified college student who had stood frozen at a frat party, watching his life crumble. Gone was the boy who shrank himself to fit into Noah's ego, and gone was the pawn my parents had tried to sell. The man in the mirror stood tall, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes burning with a quiet, unshakable power. I was a successful artist. I was a survivor. I was Julian Sterling. "It's time," Claire whispered gently, handing me a small, simple boutonniere made of white anemones. I took a deep breath, the coastal air filling my lungs, and walked out of the dressing room. I didn't have my father to walk me down the aisle, and I didn't want him there. I wasn't property being handed over from one patriarch to another. I was a free man, walking willingly toward my equal. The ceremony was set up on the massive cedar terrace overlooking the infinite expanse of the ocean. There were no flashing cameras, no society reporters, and no scheming board members. The guest list was entirely restricted to the family we had chosen for ourselves. Marcus, Liam's towering head of security, stood near the front, looking uncharacteristically emotional. Claire was there, along with the few loyal friends who had supported my art when I had nothing. A string quartet began to play a slow, hauntingly beautiful rendition of a classical symphony, the notes weaving seamlessly with the sound of the ocean wind. I stepped out onto the terrace. At the end of the aisle, standing beneath a simple arch of woven driftwood and white roses, was Liam. The breath completely left my lungs. He was dressed in a razor-sharp, bespoke tuxedo as dark as a starless night. The wind slightly ruffled his perfectly styled dark hair, and the harsh, ruthless lines of his jaw were tight with overwhelming emotion. The moment his stormy gray eyes locked onto mine, the rest of the world simply ceased to exist. I didn't see the guests. I didn't hear the music. I only saw the man who had pulled me from the wreckage and built a sanctuary around my heart. I walked toward him, my steps steady and sure. As I closed the distance, I saw a single tear break free and trace a path down Liam's cheek. The untouchable iceberg of the corporate world, weeping with absolute joy. When I finally reached him, Liam didn't wait for the officiant to speak. He reached out, his massive, trembling hands instantly finding my waist, pulling me flush against him. "You are breathtaking," Liam choked out, his voice a gravelly, devastated whisper. "I don't deserve you." "You earned me," I whispered back, resting my palms flat against his chest, feeling the frantic, hammering rhythm of his heart. The officiant, an old friend of Liam's late father, began the ceremony, but the traditional words washed over me like a gentle tide. I was entirely focused on the heat of Liam's hands, the intensity of his gaze, and the profound safety I felt in his shadow. When it came time for the vows, we didn't read from perfectly rehearsed cards. We spoke to each other, baring our souls under the open sky. Liam took both of my hands in his thumbs gently stroking my knuckles. "Julian, 3 years ago, I saw a boy painting in the shadows, pouring his broken heart onto a canvas, and I knew in that exact moment that my life would never be the same. I bought your painting to keep you safe, but the truth is, you are the one who saved me. I lived in a world of transactions, of cold calculations and ruthless betrayals. You brought color into my world. You taught me that vulnerability is not a weakness, but the ultimate strength. I vow to protect your light, to fiercely defend your peace, and to love you with every breath in my lungs, until the end of my days." There wasn't a dry eye on the terrace. Even Marcus had to discreetly wipe his face. I looked up through my own tears, my vision blurring, but my heart clearer than it had ever been. "Liam," I started, my voice trembling but ringing out with absolute sincerity. "When we signed that contract, I thought I was trading one cage for another. I thought I was surrendering to a life of cold convenience. But you didn't lock me away. You handed me the keys to the world. You stood in front of me when I was too weak to fight, and you stood behind me the moment I was ready to lead. You are not just my husband. You are the foundation upon which I have built my entire life. I choose you. I choose you today. I will choose you tomorrow, and I will choose you in every lifetime that follows." Liam's chest heaved, a ragged, beautiful sob escaping his lips. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you truly, completely married." The officiant smiled warmly. "You may seal your vows." Liam didn't hesitate. His hands tangled fiercely into my hair, and he pulled me to him, crashing his lips against mine with a starving, desperate passion. It was a kiss that held 3 years of silent longing, months of fierce protection, and the absolute certainty of an unbroken future. I opened for him, my arms wrapping tightly around his neck, pulling the massive mogul down to my level, anchoring him to my soul. The small crowd erupted into cheers, but we were lost in our own private universe. The evening bled into a spectacular, star-studded night. The reception was intimate and perfect. We drank champagne, laughed with our chosen family, and danced on the terrace under the glow of the moon. There was no anxiety, no pretending, and no looking over my shoulder. There was only joy. Long after the guests had departed to the guest houses on the property, Liam and I found ourselves alone in the massive glass-roofed art studio he had built for me. The space was quiet, bathed in the silver light of the moon. I was still wearing my ivory suit, though I had discarded the jacket and unbuttoned my collar. Liam walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling my back flush against his chest. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the side of my neck. "Are you happy, Mr. Sterling?" Liam murmured, his voice a dark, soothing rumble vibrating against my spine. "I have everything I could ever possibly want," I replied, leaning my head back against his shoulder. "I have a wedding gift for you," Liam said softly. He stepped away for a moment, walking toward the center of the studio where a massive, rectangular object stood covered by a heavy velvet drape. He grabbed the corner of the fabric and pulled it away in one smooth motion. I gasped, my hands flying to my mouth. It was the boy in the rain. My darkest, most desperate self-portrait from 3 years ago. The painting that Liam had bought to keep me from starving. But it was different. The canvas had been professionally mounted on a much larger, pristine white backing. The dark, stormy indigo and gray colors of my desperate past were now surrounded by a massive blank border, completely illuminated by the gallery lights Liam had installed above it. "Your past will always be a part of you, Julian," Liam said, walking back to me and taking my hand. "It is what made you the magnificent, fierce man standing in front of me today. But it does not define your borders anymore. The darkness is just the center. The rest of this massive canvas, the rest of our life, is entirely yours to paint, whatever colors you want, whatever future you desire. I am just here to hold the brush with you." The tears finally spilled over, hot and fast, but they were tears of absolute, unadulterated joy. I threw my arms around his neck, burying my face in his chest, holding on to him with a grip that promised I would never, ever let go. Liam Sterling had been my arranged husband. He had been my terrifying savior, my ruthless protector, and my anonymous patron. But as he lifted me off the floor, spinning me around in the quiet sanctuary he had built just for us, I knew the most important truth of all. He was my true love, and this masterpiece was finally complete. End of story. Wow, just wow. Let's all take a deep collective breath together, guys, because that ending, that was absolutely everything we could have ever wanted. Welcome back to reality, or at least, welcome back to the end of the video. It's your BL boyfriend here, and we need to sit down and talk about the absolute emotional roller coaster we just went on with Julian and Liam. Let's be real for a second and analyze what just happened in this story, because the character growth here was off the charts. We started this journey watching Julian completely shatter. Noah represents that classic toxic ex we all love to hate. The guy who takes all your energy, makes you feel small, and then tries to play the victim when he gets caught. It was so painful watching Julian shrink himself down in that frat house just to fit into Noah's selfish world. But then, enter Liam Sterling, the iceberg, The man who literally threatened to bankrupt a multi-million-dollar company just because his husband's parents insulted his velvet jacket. Honestly, standard husband goals. But what makes Liam such a top-tier character isn't just his money or his dominant CEO energy. It's his infinite patience. The arranged marriage trope is always a fan favorite, but this story completely flipped it. Liam didn't use the contract to control Julian. He used his wealth to build a fortress so Julian could finally heal, paint, and be free. And can we talk about that massive plot twist in Part 7? Finding out that Liam was the anonymous buyer of the boy in the rain 3 whole years ago. He was secretly funding Julian's life and loving him from the shadows long before he ever had the right to hold his hand. It changes the entire context of their first meeting. He wasn't a cold billionaire looking for a trophy. He was a desperate man finally getting the chance to protect the love of his life. And Julian, seeing him go from crying in his car in Part 1 to marching into a hostile corporate boardroom in a blood-red suit to save his man in Part 8, pure perfection. He took his power back and became an absolute icon. Now, this is the part where we spill the tea, and I want to hear from all of you in the comments. I have 3 questions for you today. Number 1. At what exact moment did you fall completely in love with Liam? Was it when he grabbed Noah's wrist at the restaurant, or when he wiped Julian's tears in the art studio? Number 2. How incredibly satisfying was it when Julian ripped up Victoria's $50 million check? Let's be honest, would you have taken the money, or torn it up like our boy Julian did? And number 3. What did you think of Julian's parents? Should he have given them a bailout at the end, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm going to be reading and hearting as many comments as I can. If this story made you swoon, made you cry, or made you want to find your very own billionaire architect, please hit that like button right now. It helps the channel so much, and lets me know you want more stories just like this one. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload from your BL boyfriend. We have so many more dramatic, romantic, and spicy BL stories coming your way. Thank you so much for watching, for sticking with Julian and Liam through all 10 parts, and for being the absolute best community on YouTube. I appreciate every single one of you. Stay romantic, stay fierce, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.